Hi, welcome to this episode that we have. This one's on Senate Bill 1027. Amber England is going to be with us. I said that she was a subject matter expert. I think she is, but she talked a little bit about that process of a ballot initiative, which it's about. I've got a couple of notes on what we talked about. One is that 1027 is consequential to,
Mhm.
to a ballot initiative and what we first started out in the Constitution over 100 years ago. How about you?
Yeah. I think she did a really good job of outlining kind of the myths that we hear about Senate Bill 1027, and that there's a big Supreme Court case on November 18th.
10 a.m. So she did mention this is important to all of us, and maybe we could get a big crowd there
Yeah.
too for that. But so we'll get started.
Thanks.
Well, today we're so excited. I'm between two Ellens to have Amber England. You are a friend of mine. I appreciate all the conversations that we've had about 1027 and other things that have to do with ballot initiatives. And so we're happy to have you. Give us a little description or a little background about why you are the subject matter expert for this.
Well, first, thank you for having me, Ellen and Ellen. It's serendipitous because I actually met Rep. Miller at a coffee shop to talk about Medicaid expansion when she was still working at the food. Yeah. And so one of the things I love about state question work is just the connections that you make with community members who are passionate about that thing it is that you're pushing. And it's really, it's cross partisan. You know, you can actually get further in a conversation, and so I love that. That's how we connected was through state question work. And I would say the reason why I would, I don't know that I'm a subject matter expert in anything other than maybe like at this point figuring out how to get my child out of bed for school, but but I've done quite a bit of work on state questions throughout the years. My first one um, was in 2016. We actually filed it in 2015, State Question 779. We were trying to get education funding. We lost miserably, but we were able to elevate the issue and really apply pressure to the legislature to do something. And 2 sessions later, they did. And they actually funded education at the highest level. And they raised taxes, which they hadn't done since another state question went into effect, which was State Question 640. And so that's, as I'm explaining all these state questions, they really have impacted policy and politics for as long as our state has been a state. And 1027 is really a danger to Oklahoma's right to the ballot. It is a power grab from politicians who want to keep and hold power for themselves, and it's unnecessary. Oklahoma has one of the hardest state question processes in the country, and 1027 is going to make it impossible. So while we might still have an initiative petition process in our Constitution, practically speaking, we won't have it at all should 1027 stand.
So to tell us about 1027, talk about what that is.
Yeah. So what we have seen in recent years at the state legislature, and I would say this began right after Medicaid expansion passed in 2020, we saw the legislature start chipping away little by little. I think if you're in a debate in the state house or the state senate, this is what maybe a lawmaker will call putting the camel's nose under the tent. And so that's basically what happened, starting with the 2021 legislative session. They changed the form, which was, oh, this is going to be a great way to be able to not ever have to have a signature challenge, or, this is going to be bringing us into the new, era or whatever. But it was done for a reason. It was step one in their brick by brick plan to actually dismantle the state question process. And 1027 is what I would say the final brick. And I don't know, maybe they can find even more terrible things to do. But essentially, what 1027 does is it requires a cap of signatures. So once you hit that cap of signatures across the state by county, you can't collect it more. So it essentially disenfranchises every Oklahoma voter, regardless if they live in rural Oklahoma or they live right here in downtown Oklahoma City or downtown Tulsa. It disenfranchises voters because right now our process allows anybody to sign the state question at any point in the process. They can sign it once, and it is a felony to sign it twice. And we don't have fraud in our process. It's a very, very secure process. So this was an unnecessary change. And it was, I would say it was a change to try to make it harder for signature collectors to actually gain the signatures they needed. So that's one of the big changes. Another big change is allowing the Secretary of State to actually write the gist of the petition. And the gist of the petition is what you see at the top of the signature sheet. So it gives a little synopsis of what that state question is. If you want to get into the weeds as a voter, you can actually read the entire state question because our law requires that the full law be attached to the signature sheet. And so the gist is there just to help them. But if they want to read the whole entire, policy, then they can actually just flip through the policy that has to be stapled. The staple can never come off. And so there's many ways that voters can actually ensure that they know exactly what they're voting for. There's no reason for the Secretary of State to get involved in writing the gist of the petition. It invokes politics. It allows an unelected political appointee to invoke politics into a process that should not be there. I would say that to me is the most dangerous change of 1027. You see other states that have done this. There's language written on that gist that simply makes it more difficult to get signatures and sometimes tries to turn this policy into something that actually is not. And so imagine if you allowed, a partisan hack to write legislation. You have subject matter experts writing your bills at the state legislature, lawyers.
Yeah.
That's who writes the gist of petitions for state questions. Typically, it is an attorney who knows law that writes both the gist and the actual law. So we're now allowing an unelected political appointee, probably a partisan hack, that writes that gist. And it's unfair. And it is, again, just another way for politicians at 23rd and Lincoln to grab power and keep it for themselves.
I have a funny story that is a little tangent, but just when we lived in Ohio, my husband and I, there were 2 state questions on the ballot, and they had to do with smoking. And it was the main point of the law was to kind of reduce smoking in bars was kind of the goal. But instead, there was a bill put up by the Public Health Committee, community, and then by the tobacco industry. And in order for the bill to actually get through so that we would have less smoking, you had to vote yes on one and vote no on the other. And one of them was smoke free, and the other one was smoke less. And it was so confusing. So people had to have signs in our yard that was like, vote yes, vote no, in order to get to this, And I feel like in Oklahoma, we actually, to your point, have never had confusing language or, I don't know. I just that becomes really problematic when you describe it that way.
Yeah, there are safeguards now in our process. So right now, the proponents, so if Ellen and Ellen want to go file an initiative petition as a citizen of the state of Oklahoma, they have the power to write that gist. And then if someone doesn't agree with that gist, then the opposition to the challenger would file a Supreme Court challenge and say, we believe this gist is unconstitutional. And then the courts decide, right?
This is before.
This is before, correct. And so if it is ruled unconstitutional or that it doesn't, apply, then the court says, sorry, you got to start over. That's happened in a state question that I worked on. So we had to rewrite the gist and go back and try again. And then the ballot title is actually submitted as well. At the time, the ballot title is what voters see in the ballot box once you actually qualify. That's submitted as you actually go and file your initial petition. And then when you turn in your signatures, the Attorney General has certain many of days to actually say whether or not he or she wants to make changes to the ballot title. And at any point, so he'll submit or she will submit their language for the ballot title. If anyone wants to contest that ballot title, that would also go to the court. So at no point is there a political actor, a political appointee, an unelected bureaucrat that is involved in that process. And so that safeguards the state question process from partisanship before, it gets to the ballot box and even when it gets in the ballot box.
The misinformation about 27 is just huge.
Yeah.
Someone had told me that 1027 told a large group of people that I was at makes the initiative process more representative
Yeah.
because they keep talking about all counties and stuff. Explain how the numbers are for each county, how many signatures we can get with each county before, but what 1027 changes, and maybe the smallest county and how many signatures they can gain after this 1027.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty big.
Yeah, so I'm not going to know exact numbers here, but it's pretty small. So now at the state question process, you can go to all 77 counties and collect as many signatures as you want. You have to turn in a certain number of signatures, valid signatures, in order to qualify for the ballot. And that number is based on the gubernatorial turnout. And so for right now, for constitutional state questions, it's a little north of 170,000. And for statutory changes, it's a little north of, I think, 90,000 signatures. And so you collect in as many places and as many counties as you can get to in those 90 days. What really makes the state question process is that 90-day window. And so if they really wanted the state question process to be more representative, they could increase the number of days to, let's say, 120 days. So that would be 6 months, or a full year, or not put a limit on the number of days, so that you could actually, get to more counties. Because as a campaign right now, because of the 90-day window, every signature collection process I've been involved in, we have been able to get signatures from all 77 counties. And we have these are volunteers. So these are folks who live in places like Idabel and Ardmore and Altus that are carrying around the signature sheets because they care about that issue. So these aren't paid signature gatherers going out to these rural counties. These are community members carrying around these petitions. So now with the change with 1027, there's a cap. So I believe it's 11% that you can get for constitutional. So 11% of the total number of registered voters. And I think it's either it's 8% or not. I can't remember the percent for statutory, but essentially it just puts a hard cap. So now if you are, let's say you're out collecting in Oklahoma County, if you wanted to, as a state question, you could collect as many signatures as you wanted to get. Anyone who wanted to sign that could. Now, as soon as they hit that cap, they have to stop collecting signatures in Oklahoma County. So I live in Oklahoma County. There was a state question that kicked off yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago, on open primaries. If I wanted to sign that petition and they've already hit that cap, then I can't sign the petition. That takes my right away as an Oklahoman to be able to sign that petition. Same thing if you're living in Harmon County. And Harmon County is way out in the panhandle, small percentage of registered voters who live out there. And so I think the number is like less than 30 people would actually be able to sign, or 80 people. I mean, it's a tiny number of people who would be able to actually be eligible to sign. And so if they are saying that it is more representative, it is just a way for them to, I think, say, really hide the truth of what they're trying to do, which is essentially just grab power from the legislature. They don't want Oklahomans using this process. They want every bill, every policy, they want to control that. Because who do they work with to do that? They work with lobbyists. They work, they're not actually out having to talk to real voters about this stuff. We were able to pass Medicaid expansion after 10 years of the legislature not being able to make it through. Same thing with criminal justice reform. You think term limits ever would have passed had the legislature been able to do that? No, it took an initiative petition process and people actually getting that done. So it's, both political stripes have used this state question process to push the legislature when they fail to act. And that is what this tool is. It's a populist tool to say to lawmakers, Oklahoma people deserve a say in the types of policies that they want passed, because they have real problems in their lives. And if their politicians aren't going to fix those problems, then they want to step up and do the same.
It was, I know some of the people debated that, like, people are signing a petition that they don't know anything about, and therefore, that they're confusing people before it goes to the ballot. And I thought many people sign a ballot initiative because they want the opportunity to learn more and see it on the ballot.
Yeah.
And so I never understood that like a ballot signature doesn't necessarily mean that you're for or against it. It means that you believe that the state, as a
have a
whole
choice.
should have a choice. And that is really frustrating to me.
Yeah, I think in every state question I've been involved in, there have been many people who were not for the actual policy sign it because they say, I want the right to vote on it. Because I want to be able to decide this issue for myself. And that is the thing that this piece of legislation is going to take away. We still have to pass a state question in Oklahoma by 50%.
And everyone can vote
plus
on it if you're
a
registered
majority,
voter.
yeah, a majority of voters in the state of Oklahoma have to pass.
Yes.
Have to vote yes in order for a state question to go into effect. And so, um, that is just it's scare tactics. Them saying that folks don't know what they're signing is I would welcome any state lawmaker who wants to come with me to do signature collection or one of our volunteers to see how the process actually works. And they may claim, well, I saw someone collecting signatures down in, Scissortail Park, and they didn't, I saw people signing it, didn't know what they were talking about. These are just anecdotal things that they're
Right.
trying to say to scare people.
Right.
Like the process has worked for over 100 years. And all of a sudden there's a problem with it. And why all of a sudden? Because the policies that have passed most recently are policies that this legislature that is in charge now hasn't wanted to tackle. And we could get into why. I believe it's because like most of these elections are decided in a primary and they are listening to a very, very small percentage of people. And so the bills that are coming, the laws that are coming out of the legislature right now really aren't a reflection of all of voters. And we know that, right? But they can control that process. When they can't control the state question process, now they're trying to make the changes so they can.
You bring up, and we spoke about this about 1027, the disenfranchised part of it, which I always say anytime, ADA, would you look at ADA, which I still think we moved people from rural because we didn't have health care into those populous areas. And so now again, we're disenfranchising that. But so I feel that that's a big thing to repeal that law. So tell us, where is 1027 in some legal stuff that's going on?
Yeah. So there was a group of folks who filed a challenge in the Supreme Court, a constitutional challenge to the law. And the Supreme Court has ordered oral argument for that lawsuit, and it will be on November 18th. They're going to hear it in the Oklahoma Supreme Court, 10 o'clock in the morning. I have been encouraging folks to actually show up to that because I think this is one of the most consequential decisions that the Supreme Court will actually decide, because in effect, if it holds, we will no longer have a state question process. And so if and until we could maybe, pass a state question about state questions and get the process that we would actually want, we won't have a state question process of 1027 is upheld. It will be nearly impossible to actually utilize the very power that our Constitution says is the first power reserved for the people. And that power and that right will go away should 1027 hold.
Because it is going to be extremely hard if 1027 passes, like you said.
Yeah. And there's all different scenarios that could happen. They could throw out the entire law and say the whole thing is unconstitutional. They could take parts of it because it is severable. And so they could take certain parts of it and say, well, this part can stand, this part can go. There's other parts of it that I didn't get into because it's kind of weedy.
Yeah.
But they could just say certain parts are unconstitutional. But I would also look for the legislature, regardless of what happens on 1027, unless it's completely upheld. I would see that potentially the legislature would try to come in and make even more changes during this legislative session. And so I don't think we can take our eye off the prize, even if we are to, win this constitutional challenge. We really do have to protect the Oklahoma ballot measure process at all costs. I would say it's the only reason why many of our rural hospitals haven't closed. It's why we were able to deliver health care to nearly, it was over 300,000 Oklahomans. We were able to get criminal justice reform, medical marijuana, term limits. We limited the size of government in terms of what, if taxes can be raised on Oklahoma families. I think that's huge. I probably wouldn't have voted for that law, but I wanted to one right to decide that issue for myself. But all of these laws, conservative laws, liberal laws, whatever you want to call them, have all been put in place from Oklahoma voters through the state question process. And it would be a shame to see that go away.
So there may be a ballot initiative process to save and protect the ballot
Well,
initiative process.
I think that I think like in a perfect world, yes,
Yeah.
there would need to be a lot of things to happen to make that happen. I mean, if 1027 holds, you would actually have to use the 1027 process, which then is nearly impossible to use. So, like, could you actually do it? I don't. It would be very, very difficult. So, I think that if certain parts are ruled unconstitutional, or if all parts are ruled unconstitutional, there's a chance. If it stands, I think we're stuck with what we have. It's hard.
The idea. So in June, we do have something that we can vote on, and it's wages, and you did a lot of work on
Yeah.
ballot initiative collecting, and it's interesting because that was brought up to the legislature to take.
Yeah.
care.
And there were changes happening while we were going through signature collection process. So we didn't even know, like, are we going to be under the 3 of 5
Yeah.
data point or the 4 of 5 data point? And so we collected way more than we probably needed because we were like, well, we're going to collect as if we're under the new 4 of 5 law. And we were actually under the 3 of 5 law. So we qualified, but it was very confusing, and there was, at one point, there was a part of a law that was going to require every volunteer to have a background check. And this was as we were trying to get off the ground. And, as a campaign, we didn't have a lot of funding. So we were having folks sign a form saying that they would agree to have a background check just in case we had to be under that law. And most of all, the paid signature collectors all have background checks. But volunteers are these folks who are, me, you, we're all out, collecting signatures. But we made everybody sign a form saying that they agreed to a background check. That law went away, or it didn't actually get signed into law. But it was a very, very confusing process. And we were able to qualify the state question minimum wage. That's, and again, something they could have decided.
Yep.
It hasn't been raised since 2009. And here we are in 2025, stuck at $7.25 an hour. And I don't know about any of you guys, but I don't think that I could live off $7.25 an hour. And I think a new law, a new study just came out that said, I think that the current wages right now, I don't think there is a spot in Oklahoma that $7.25 that's a living wage. It's just not.
Nope, definitely not. And I just think you had an overwhelming amount of signatures that supported this effort.
Correct.
And so, and then another ballot initiative, our state question petition started 2 days ago.
Yes.
Okay. And so, and what is that one that's currently taking place?
So
The other
that is an open primary. So they started on October 29th, and they were delayed a lot because of another change in our election law, or our state question law. So they had a 6-month waiting period, 120 days after they actually filed their initial petition. Used to it was 10 days. It went to 90 days. I'm sorry, 90 days on the front end and 90 days on the back end for a total of 180 days. But so they had to wait 3 months before they could actually, and then at the end of that 3 months, they got challenged. And the person who challenged them in court, the organization, said, well, we knew we wouldn't win, but we just wanted to delay them. So there's already gamesmanship on the other side. And so they're out collecting, and that state question, if it makes the ballot and if it passes, would what they call open the primaries. So every person running would appear on the ballot with their party registration next to their name. Everyone would be on the same ballot, on the primary ballot, and then the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, would go to the general election. It's how they do elections in Tulsa and Oklahoma County. For mayor in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City, Missouri has the law, I believe. Many places, Louisiana has that process. These are very red states. So, but I think that, like, if a voter wants to vote in a primary, they ought to. And right now, the Republican primaries are completely closed, and the Democratic primary is partially open. They allow independents to vote in their primary, but if you're a libertarian, too bad. So it disenfranchises a lot of voters the way our primary system is right now.
So are they collecting, do you know if they're collecting signatures like it's 1027? Or they're just
They actually filed a lawsuit, and they were they were ruled that they were not subject to 1027. So there's a retroactivity. So they aren't subject to 1027 for now. And so they're out collecting, and they got a temporary stay on 1027. So good for them. It should not be applied to them. They filed their state question long before 1027 was ever even, I think, taken out of committee. Yeah.
such gamesmanship on that too. And I think it's the idea, like how you talk about that was the first power that we wanted as a state over 100 years ago. And we are totally taking that away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the voters would come out. I think people would come out.
These
I do too.
constitutionalists, they don't really like the Constitution that much, do
They
they?
only like some parts.
Yeah. Strong Constitution for me, not for the.
Yes.
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 Was there anything else that you'd like to talk about 1027? Anything that we missed?
No, I'm just so thankful for you to highlight this. It is a real, like I said, I think it is one of the most consequential decisions that the Supreme Court will make in our state. And I don't know that enough people know about it. They're just trying to live their lives. They're trying to figure out how to feed their family, pay their electric bill, get to work on time. And these legislature depends and hopes that people don't know that this is going on. Because they know how popular this state question process is. They know how populous it is. So that's why they're making these changes during legislative session when they're hopeful that no one's paying attention. So I appreciate just the elevating the issue and talk to your friends and family about it.
Well, the other thing that we always do at the end of our podcast is we ask our guests to ask us a question.
Okay.
So if do you have a question
Sure.
for us?
I do. Okay. So this is rooted in my shift in the way my daily living happened after I had my daughter. And I'm curious because you guys are moms,
Mm-hmm.
if it's shifted for you. So the question is, are you a morning shower person or a night shower person?
Oh, have been, always will be morning shower.
Okay.
I'm a morning.
I'm a night.
Now I think it's switched for me that I can enjoy my mornings now. I'm empty nested, so night showers are kind of fun because then in the morning I can just relax.
You know what changed me though is when I stopped washing my hair.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
be real honest. That
Yeah,
was
I
a
don't-
game changer for my time.
Yeah.
You know? So
That's right.
I just keep going one more day and figure it out. So
Yeah. Yeah, I became a night shower exclusively after I had Josie. I had a friend just explain to me how relaxing it would be for me as a mom to just have 10 minutes at night to myself in the shower that would help me sleep better. And so I started it right when I got home from the hospital.
Uh-huh.
And now I cannot go to sleep without taking a shower. Yeah.
That's nice.
Sometimes I'll take a shower in the morning too,
Yeah.
but I never miss my night shower. So
Yeah.
I just wondered if you guys were
That's
similar.
self-care. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish someone would have told me that
Yeah. Yeah.
26 years ago. Yeah, that's nice. Well, that's good. Well, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you
Thanks,
guys for
Amber.
having me.